Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military. Now more than ever, you need reliable news you can count on. Since 1861, Stars and Stripes has been committed to bringing you the news without the spin. We believe in the First Amendment, and we're damn proud to have been there alongside you wherever you were deployed, keeping you connected. Today, we're only a click away. Go to stripes.com, use promo code podcast, and get 50% off your subscription. 50% off. There are some folks out there that think Stars and Stripes is a little old-fashioned. Well, folks, maybe right now, we need a little old-fashioned. Go to stripes.com and get reconnected with a legacy of news without the spin. Stripes.com. Just a quick warning, this episode contains themes of violence against children. Listener discretion is advised. On June 15th, 2018, Matthew Philip Wright, a 30-year-old Marine veteran, drove an armored truck onto the middle of the Mike O'Callahan Pat Tillman Memorial Bridge near the Hoover Dam. There, he blocked traffic and stood outside of the vehicle holding up a sign that read, "Release the OIG report." When authorities showed up, Wright went back into his armored truck and engaged in a 90-minute standoff. From inside the armored truck, Wright posted several videos to social media.
We the people demand full disclosure of the OIG report. No more lies. We want the truth. We deserve the truth.
Witnesses claim that Wright was pointing a gun through portholes on the side of the truck. The ordeal came to a head when he tried to flee the scene and the tires of the armored truck were punctured by road spikes. The vehicle came to a stop a few miles southeast of the bridge, and Wright was taken into custody. What would compel this Marine veteran to make such a public and dangerous stance? What is the OIG report? What does all of this have to do with Q? Where we go one, we go all. And in this episode, we're going to explore the world of QAnon and what that might have to do with our veterans and our armed forces. I'm Rod Rodriguez. This is Military Matters. Some of you listening may not have heard about QAnon by name, but you're probably familiar with some of the concepts behind it because some of those ideas have made it into major headlines. Child pedophilia rings, Pizzagate, and the existence of a deep state are terms that have made their way into the mainstream. Before we jump into the deep and murky waters that is QAnon, we need to understand a little bit about where it came from and exactly what it is. If you want a more expanded explanation of QAnon's history, I highly recommend you check out the podcast QAnon Anonymous, Episode 1, Introduction to QAnon. In fact, one of the hosts of that podcast, Travis View, answered some of my questions that I had about QAnon, and we'll hear from him later in this episode. So to understand QAnon, we have to go back to October 17th, 2017, on the infamous 4chan image board. 4chan is another term you've probably heard because of its connection not only to QAnon, but to investigations and arrests connected to child pornography, threats of violence, and internet attacks. So 4chan is where this all kind of starts, with an anonymous post by a user calling himself Q, and a thread called Calm Before the Storm, where Q wrote, quote, "Hillary Clinton will be arrested between 7:45 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, the morning on August 30th, 2017, end quote. After this, Q begins to post sporadically. In these posts, Q claims to be a U.S. intelligence official with special government access and knowledge. Now, this is where things get a bit complicated. You see, there's no way really to identify who Q is. The postings are anonymous. Is Q one person, several people, a hoax? There's very little to go on. On top of it, Q's postings are often cryptic, leaving the reader to develop their own conclusions, which has led to a lot of different ideas about what Q's message really is.
So there is no like one sort of organization. It seems to be the combination of like maybe some sort of clever manipulative people on these chan sites who assume the identity of Q. And also it's in part a real genuine grassroots kind of movement.
That's Travis View, co-host of QAnon Anonymous and a Washington Post contributor. So the general QAnon theory alleges that there exists a conspiracy, a cabal, of Satan-worshipping pedophiles operating a child sex trafficking operation at the highest levels of the entertainment industry and within our own government, and that the president, specifically President Trump, is at war with this cabal, and that soon there will be a day of reckoning, also known in the QAnon circles as the coming storm.
But the rest of it is sort of the content of the general beliefs are created by the QAnon followers themselves. We sometimes call QAnons like a big tent conspiracy theory, in the sense that it sort of accepts people with a broad variety of different conspiratorial beliefs. So if you believe in something, as something like Spygate, for example, then of course you'll find a home in the QAnon community.
Spygate being the conspiracy theory first posed back in 2018 that alleges the Obama administration had placed a spy in the president's 2016 campaign.
But also if you believe something as deranged as the idea that JFK Jr. didn't actually die in a plane crash in 1999 and is still alive to this day, and he's going to replace Vice President Pence as Trump's running mate for the upcoming election, then you can find a home in QAnon too.
That last part about JFK Jr. replacing Vice President Pence, real theory that some QAnoners actually believe. Enough so that Rolling Stone actually published an article about this in July of last year. Let's go back to the Mike O'Callahan-Pat Tillman Memorial Bridge near the Hoover Dam. William Wright is in a standoff with police, and he's holding a sign saying, "Release the OIG report." The report Wright is referring to is an Office of Inspector General report into the actions of FBI Director James Comey. Now, at the time of the standoff, that OIG report had already been released, but the consensus among QAnoners was that there was another report, one that would support many of the QAnon tenets of an in-place deep state within our government. Very quickly, a deep state is the notion that a secret group of people within our government are really running the entire thing, not our elected officials. Now, we could chalk this one violent act up to mental health issues or maybe PTSD, either way, an isolated incident. But according to a paper titled The QAnon Conspiracy Theory, A Security Threat in the Making, published by the Combating Terrorism Center, or the CTC, earlier this year, the problem of QAnon violence might just be beginning. The authors of this paper claim that QAnon represents, quote, a militant and anti-establishment ideology rooted in an apocalyptic desire to destroy the existing, corrupt world to usher in a promised golden age, end quote. The paper goes on to outline 5 QAnon-related criminal cases, including the well-known Comet Pizza ping pong shooting incident involving Edgar Welch, to the lesser-known but highly bizarre murder of a senior Gambino crime family member at the hands of Anthony Camello, who was admittedly obsessed with QAnon beliefs to the point that he wrote a giant Q on his hand and was showing it off during his first court appearance. The authors of the CTC paper used those recent criminal cases to show how QAnon has contributed to the radicalization of ideologically motivated violent extremists right here in the U.S. At a House Homeland Security hearing on national security threats, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, was asked by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee about how the Bureau addresses QAnon as it relates to violent acts.
We view QAnon as essentially less of an organization and more of a sort of a complex set of conspiracy theories. And certainly we have had cases that properly predicated cases involving violence, where people have been motivated by some of those conspiracy theories. But as you said, we don't investigate the ideology or the conspiracy theory itself.
So we have this amorphous ideology, a big tent conspiracy, as Travis put it, where a mystery image board poster writes cryptic messages, folks create their own ideas and conspiracy theories from those posts, and those theories have inspired some people to take violent action against what they think is a deep state cover fueled by Satanism and pedophilia. You'd think that with such a controversial angle, public figures would shy away from this belief system. In fact, quite the opposite.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That's retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, leading a small group of people through an oath of office, typically taken by federally elected officials. But he finishes it with something different. That's not in the oath.
Where we go one, we go all.
Where we go one, we go all.
God bless America.
God bless America.
Where we go one, we go all is a phrase supposedly inscribed on a bell on one of John F. Kennedy's sailboats. I say supposedly because I couldn't find any evidence to support that bell existed on any JFK boats. There is some evidence, and I use that term very loosely considering I'm referring to a Reddit thread and a Daily Beast article, that the bell in question is actually on the former presidential yacht, the Honey Fitz. That boat would later be used in several movies, including the 1996 Jeff Bridges film White Squall, in which the bell can be clearly seen, and the phrase "where we go one, we go all" is a central theme of the film. Incidentally, in the trailer to the film, which you can look up on YouTube, there's a scene where one of the characters says, quote, "I don't want to be what I was when I left." Anonymous. Am I connecting dots that don't exist now too?
I think one differentiating factor between sort of QAnon and general worry about the state of freedom in the country is that QAnon followers, they believe that there is a plan. It's like there are threats to our freedom, or there are powerful evil people who are controlling things from behind the scenes, but there is a plan that the military is going to execute to rid the world of evil. So there's sort of a fatalism, there's sort of a confidence and optimism that those problems are going to be taken care of by someone else much more powerful and frankly more competent than myself. Whereas, like, again, people who are maybe who are more, I guess, more militia minded, they do not believe that there is a plan. they think that the responsibility is on their shoulders, and they think that some bad, sort of oppressive forces could come to them and, do something, awful if they don't resist it in a very serious way.
When we returned from the break, veterans take a stand against child sex trafficking, but is what they're standing on stable ground? And then General Flynn might just be the tip of a QAnon military iceberg. When we return. Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less, because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military. 2018. In my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, Louis Meyer captured the attention of the QAnon social media community by taking a local news channel through a deserted desert encampment he claimed was the site of a child trafficking ring. He pointed to all manner of dirty and broken camping gear, holes in the ground, and makeshift cover, explaining how what viewers were watching was part of a bigger pedophilia operation. Authorities would conduct an investigation into these claims and find that there was no evidence to support the makeshift camp was anything but a place where homeless people were congregating and living out of. These facts didn't discourage Louis from forming a group called Veterans on Patrol. Quick note, Louis himself is not a veteran. Louis would later be arrested for making false reports and would continue to be arrested for trespassing on a private property, making allegations that a local cement company was a child trafficking center, and even going so far as to destroy and steal water tanks set up by the organization Humane Borders for cross-border migrants because he claimed they were part of the child trafficking conspiracy. What stood out to me about this story is that a non-veteran would create a group called Veterans on Patrol. Why wrangle vets into this conspiracy? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple, actually. It goes back to, why does an extremist organization want to recruit veterans or service members? Because we bring something to the table that the civilian population usually doesn't: skills and friends. A 2008 intelligence assessment from the FBI titled "White Supremacist Recruitment of Military Personnel Since 9/11" states, quote, "Extremist leaders seek to recruit members with military experience in order to exploit their discipline, knowledge of firearms, explosives, and tactical skills, as well as, in the case of active duty soldiers, their access to weapons and intelligence." Another value that vets and service members bring to extremist groups is our network. We're a pretty tight-knit community, and we have a tendency to stay in touch with folks we served with and to talk to peers within our units and organizations. That's exactly what these groups need to grow. So Lewis claims to have exposed a desert child trafficking camp, starts a group called Veterans on Patrol, gives these vets a sense of purpose, direction, and motivation for a cause you would be hard-pressed not to call righteous, the safety of children. Now, regardless of what authorities would find, the genie was out of the bottle. Suddenly, stories ran through social media circles not only within the QAnon communities, but through veteran communities as well. I would know because I myself am part of several veteran-centric social media groups, especially on Facebook. I started seeing tons of videos about exploited children, how Hollywood elites were abusing kids, and politically motivated messages implicating the Clintons, George Soros, Jeffrey Epstein. Even Tom Hanks and Lady Gaga were spotlighted as being part of this global child sex trafficking ring. One message in particular that I saw spread through my social media was that of panda eyes. So the message was always a video or a picture of a child with deep, dark bruising around their eyes. We're told that those injuries were from violent sexual assaults and that the term panda eyes has been popularized by music artists in lyrics and in film. A little bit of digging would reveal not only are those injuries not in line with those types of assaults, but that the pictures being circulated were from children in war-torn countries exposed to explosions. This messaging felt targeted toward the veteran community. I didn't see much of it anywhere else, and it makes sense. We're a community that loves kids, loves our families, and we don't like sitting on the sidelines while bad things happen. Then, I saw this messaging start popping up in other social media circles, such as parenting forums. The New York Times even wrote an article about this Panda Eyes movement after a group was organized called Mothers of QAnon, which vowed to bring this global conspiracy to light.
I mean, we talk a lot about how like the QAnon conception of child trafficking or human trafficking is a totally off base.
That's Travis' view again.
In fact, so off base that the several human trafficking nonprofits had issued statements distancing themselves from QAnon conspiracy theories or the QAnon community itself.
Recently, Wayfair, an online furniture shopping site, became the focal point for QAnon child trafficking conspiracy. The theory went viral, which resulted in social media traffic spikes for anti-trafficking groups, but this also caused a lot of problems for those same organizations. The National Human Trafficking Hotline issued a news release saying it had been overwhelmed with false reports. If anything, these types of sensational conspiracy theories were distorting the truth of child trafficking, turning it into some secret cabal of evildoers, when in fact, it's usually far more simple and closer to home. Lori Cohen, the executive director of ECPAT USA, an anti-trafficking organization, said, quote, "It's easier to focus on public figures than to think about the reality that trafficking is happening in our midst, among people we know, to children we know," end quote. So we know the value that vets and service members bring to the conspiracy table, and that the folks pushing these theories know what buttons to push to make us more apt to digest those theories. But how far has this already gone? Who's already followed the white rabbit? That's another QAnon term.
My name is Jack Murphy. I served in the Ranger Regiment and in Special Forces for 8 years. I got out of the Army in 2010, majored in political science at Columbia University, and I've worked as a journalist for about the last 8 years, primarily covering military affairs.
Jack Murphy's recent article for ConnectingVets.com, Analysis for Some Military Veterans QAnon Conspiracies Offer Comfort and Belonging, was the inspiration for this episode. Up until I'd read that article, I knew something felt off about some of the messaging I'd been seeing in the veteran social media circles, but I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know what I was looking at. Jack's been studying the QAnon phenomena as it relates to the military community for some time now.
We've already seen General Flynn take the QAnon oath on social media, and he's retired now. But it's not just young enlisted guys who are getting into QAnon. There are, for sure, retired colonels and generals involved. And I shudder to think what's going on in the upper echelon of some parts of the military and who else is on board with all of this craziness. And yeah, they have responsibility for men and weapons and deployments overseas. And I mean, it's a frightening scenario. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios you can start spinning in your imagination, and I don't want to go overboard with it. I just wanted to point out that, yeah, this could be a national security threat.
That scenario might already be playing out. Former Navy SEAL Louis Garrick Fernbaugh has been described by Portland police as a, quote, person of interest after he was identified and filmed leaving a protest where pipe bombs were thrown into the crowd. That footage was uploaded to Twitter, and you can clearly see Fernbaugh holding what looks like a helmet with night vision goggles attached to them.
Hey, you want to stop there? Hey, you want to stop? Why are you throwing bombs at people? Why are you throwing pipe bombs at people?
Look, man,
Yeah?
I'm not the guy you want to fuck with.
Okay, well, why are you throwing bombs at people?
I don't know what you're talking about,
You don't know what I'm talking about?
but I'm not that guy you want to fuck with.
Okay,
I'm fucking telling you.
good to know.
Yeah.
In an interview with Task and Purpose, Fernbaugh confirmed he was the man in the Twitter video, but maintains that he was not the person throwing pipe bombs. When asked about why he was wearing a helmet and night vision goggles, he explained that he was doing reconnaissance on Antifa as part of his efforts to develop a service to law enforcement. He told Task and Purpose, quote, my education and experience uniquely qualify me to develop strategies to counter this threat, end quote. Fernbaugh has been described in numerous news outlets as a conspiracy theorist with possible ties to white supremacist propaganda. It turns out that there are quite a few former Special Operations members who are being vocal about their conspiracy beliefs. They refer to themselves as a force for Q and other special operatives as, quote, the teeth of light. Posts like this often mention their desire to mete out justice and violence to those who would stand on the other side of this conspiracy. One such former SEAL, Stephen Ralston, whose Instagram is rife full of QAnon rhetoric, can be heard in a teaser trailer for one of his Instagram videos saying, quote, if these people aren't brought to justice, there's going to be some fucking street justice doled out, end quote.
Some people aren't going to like me saying this, but in some ways, you know, special forces and special operations soldiers, we do amazing things. And there are so many amazing ex-special forces veterans out there who are doing amazing things. But there is also a group of us that is camped out on Facebook all day, every day, posting conspiracy theories about Hillary, posting fake news from dubious, perhaps Russian alternative news websites, and otherwise just kind of spouting, you know, racist nonsense all day. And I think there's a number of different reasons why this occurs and why some of our guys go down this sort of rabbit hole, if you will. And I alluded to them, you know, in the op-ed I wrote. I think that when we leave the military, it creates a lot of internal turbulence in ourselves. It's well written about, you know, that we have problems transitioning into civilian life and the various reasons why. But I think just to go down the line, some of the big things is that, you know, we see the world through the lens of good versus evil. We don't see the sorts of shades of gray. So we identify as the hero and we see everyone who is not us as the villain. We come out of the military with a sort of like Prussian mindset that we then imprint upon society at large, even though we have now left the military. So the way this ends up getting spun is, you know, the Democrats are pure evil. Nancy Pelosi is, you know, Chairman Mao, or actually Obama was Chairman Mao, right? Joe Biden is Joe Stalin. Okay, you don't like the Democrats, don't vote for them. I get it. But it's not a question of one side being these angels protecting the U.S. Constitution and the other side are deep state Satanists.
Unfortunately, it's not just our special operations veterans that succumb to these conspiracy mindsets, but also service members. Jack Posobiec was a Navy Reserve intelligence officer who made a name for himself pushing the ideas of child sex rings under pizzerias, purposely agitating crowds during protests, and making all manners of claims that would later be found to be false and debunked. He did this while working at the Office of Naval Intelligence, both as a service member and as a civilian. In 2017, his security clearance was suspended. No word on whether it was reinstated or not. What makes QAnon so insidious is that it can plug into so many other ideologies. White supremacists can plug their racism into just about any facet of QAnon, and they've done that. Then there's the Boogaloo movement of veterans and civilians wearing Hawaiian shirts and body armor, armed with rifles showing up to protests. And their distrust of the government only feeds into the idea that the deep state is the real enemy, that the Alphabet Boys, or the FBI, DEA, and ATF, are all being run by the satanic cabal, so it's their duty to oppose them. Last year, the FBI Phoenix Field Office published an intelligence bulletin titled Anti-Government, Identity-Based, and Fringe Political Conspiracy Theories Very Likely Motivate Some Domestic Extremists to Commit Criminal, Sometimes Violent Activity. The paper concludes, quote, although conspiracy theory-driven crime and violence is not a new phenomenon, today's information environment has changed the way conspiracy theories develop, spread, and evolve. The advent of the internet and social media has enabled promoters of conspiracy theories to produce and share greater volumes of material via online platforms that larger audiences of consumers can quickly and easily access. Based on the increased volume and reach of the conspiratorial content due to modern communication methods, it is logical to assume that more extremist-minded individuals will be exposed to potentially harmful conspiracy theories, accept ones that are favorable to their views, and possibly carry out criminal or violent actions as a result. The internet has also enabled a crowdsourcing effect, wherein conspiracy theory followers themselves shape a given theory by presenting information that supplements, expands, or localizes its narrative, end quote. The paper goes on to express concern by, quote, some researchers who believe a rise of conspiracism fostered in part by the internet may be accompanied by a search for scapegoats, those believed to be the conspirators' allies, henchmen, or collaborators. Jack Murphy.
The problem is that the human mind, the American mind, has been completely rewired and re-engineered by social media, that we're now addicted to the dopamine, the adrenaline that comes along with the sort of outrage of social media and media, mainstream media also. How do you wean people off of that? How do you get them, detox them off of that and return to a sort of sound, thoughtful rationality? I don't think anyone knows how to do that. And I don't think you can just look at conspiracy theorists. I think you have to look at society as a whole as having a societal-wide mental health care issue at this point.
Travis View.
What I worry about is that what happens when QAnon followers, they stop trusting the plan, because they still believe that this profound evil is still creeping into the United States. They still think that this cabal is still in control. They still think that all of these high-level people are doing unimaginably evil things to children. They'll still have that belief, but they may lose hope that this magical Q team is going to, come in like the cavalry and then save the day. When that happens, I worry that they might think the best thing to do is to take matters into their own hands. And if that happens, they may become more dangerous than they are right now.
Conspiracy theories like QAnon are like horoscopes and a choose-your-own-adventure had a baby. You see yourself, your fears, your beliefs reflected back at you. But the best part is that at the center of this blockbuster Hollywood plot is you. You are an active participant in this global thriller, and you can be the hero of the story. You're no longer just a person life happens to. No, you're now the bearer of a hidden truth, chosen to stand up to a force of evil. You have been called upon to be part of something bigger than you. And who doesn't want to answer that call? I get it. Nothing is ever so simple, is it? If there's something we can walk away with from our time in service, our time in uniform, is that nothing is ever black and white. No good versus evil, just people. People following people. People doing what they think is right at the time and hoping history doesn't judge them too harshly. Can we detox our society from the social media conspiracy? I don't know. Are there real-life conspiracies that have turned out to be true? There sure have been. But I would encourage you to think about the message you're receiving from any source, from this source. Ask yourself, what is it that you're being asked to believe, asked to think, asked to do? I can't tell you what value system to filter all that through, but I only hope that we don't become the victims of self-fulfilled prophecies of doom. Because where goes one, we go all. I want to thank my guests, Jack Murphy and Travis View. You can follow Jack Murphy on Twitter at JackMurphyRGR. You can also read his work at connectingvets.com. His article on QAnon and special operations is in the show notes. You can hear more from Travis View on the podcast QAnon Anonymous. Go to QAnonAnonymous.com and you can follow him on Twitter at Travis_View. I'm Rod Rodriguez. This was Military Matters. You can follow me on Twitter at RodPodRod. Don't forget to go to stripes.com, use promo code podcast to get 50% off your digital subscription. 50% off, use promo code podcast. This episode was sponsored by Cheap Tickets. Go to cheaptickets.com/military and get 18% off hotels. Offer valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserve, and the National Guard. The best trips in life are cheap. Go to cheaptickets.com/military. This episode was written and produced by Rod Rodriguez, executive produced by Benjamin Bateman. I will see you at the next episode.